VA flight cancellations and refueling strikes set to bring further trip chaos. Airline to lay off 500 further breakouts in coming weeks as Heathrow workers plan to strike as UK school leaves start. Please use the sharing tools set up via the share button at the top or side of the papers. Copying papers to partake with others is a breach of cancellations and brand policy. Dispatch licensing at Footcom to buy fresh rides. Subscribers may partake in up to 10 or 20 papers per month using the gift composition service. Further information can be set up at another 500 cancelled British Airways breakouts and strike action by workers who refuel airplanes. At Heathrow Field hang to inflict annihilation on the UK's summer flight. The airline advised on Tuesday that it would cancel the fresh breakouts in the coming weeks as it struggles to manage dislocation and staff dearths, shortly before the field workers said they were preparing to walk out on the first weekend of the academy vacation. The union Unite said members employed by Aviation Fuel Services, one of 4 companies furnishing fueling services at the UK's busiest field, would carry an original 72-hour strike, from July 21 to July 24, in a disagreement over pay. It advised the strike would beget considerable dislocation and detainments because the company handed services to nearly 70 airlines operating at Heathrow, although it added that there was still room to reach a deal if AFS returns to the negotiating table. The trouble of spreading strike action will add to airlines' troubles as they seek to forestall a reprise of the detainments and cancellations that hit passengers during the UK's academy half-term last month. VA's operations at Heathrow would not be affected by any artificial action at AFS, as it uses different refueling companies. But the airline faces the possibility of a strike by around half of its own Heathrow check-in staff, which could potentially take place on the same weekend, although the unions Unite and GMB haven't yet set any date for action. VA on Tuesday said it would cut its summer flight schedule further because the aeronautics sector was facing the most grueling period in its history. It's also said to be reviewing whether to cut yet more breakouts laterally this week after the UK government blazoned a remittal on strict rules that force airlines to use or lose their economic takeoff and wharf places. Please use the sharing tools set up via the share button at the top or side of the papers. Copying papers to partake with others is a breach of cancellations and brand policy. Dispatch licensing at Footcom to buy fresh rides. Subscribers may partake in up to 10 or 20 papers per month using the gift composition service. Further information can be set up at VA laid out plans in May to cut back 10% of breakouts during its summer season, which runs between March and October, to try to fit trustability into its drooping operations. The carrier has now decided to cut a further 1%, which is the fellow of about 500 breakouts, the maturity of which will be taken out this month. By bouncing the breakouts beforehand, VA operation hopes to avoid the last nanosecond dislocation that hit some airlines in the UK beforehand last month, performing in chaotic scenes as numerous passengers learned of flight cancellations one after arriving at the field. Still, the need to lose further breakouts is a blow to the airline and Principal Superintendent Sean Doyle, who had hoped the decisive action in May would allow the group to operate its pruned-down schedule in full. VA is understaffed after cutting workers during the epidemic, but it has also suffered from the wider resourcing issues facing the entire assiduity, including airfields, subcontracted ground instructors, and air business control staff. As the entire aeronautics assiduity continues to face the most grueling period in its history, regrettably it has come necessary to make some further reductions. We're in touch with guests to apologize and offer to rebook them or issue a full refund, the airline said in a statement. Other airlines, including EasyJet and Lufthansa, have been forced to take analogous action to cut their schedules after overvaluing how numerous breakouts they and their suppliers would be suitable to deliver this summer. Cancelled Air Canada breakouts nearly leave Sudbury couple stranded in Toronto. Northern field directors say reduced flight schedule should mean smaller last nanosecond cancellations. Nicola Clare and her hubby would have been stranded at Toronto's Pearson International Airport were it not for help from extended family who drove them home to Sudbury. On June 29, Air Canada blazoned it would cancel dozens of diurnal breakouts during the summer due to a number of challenges, including a deficit of staff. Those cancellations affected Leclerc and her hubby Andy, who had just returned to Canada from a European holiday to visit family. Doubly during the trip, Air Canada cancelled their return breakouts. The couple flew into Toronto's Pearson Airport on July 1 and stayed a night in a hostel before catching their return flight the coming morning. But a last nanosecond cancellation dispatch came as they were heading back to the field with no immediate result from Air Canada. "We sat there in the field all this time and I no way got a dispatch back from them," Leclerc said. She said Air Canada told them they cancelled the breakouts because they did not have enough crew available to operate the airplane. Leclerc said she and her hubby were far from the only people left stranded at the field. "People were lying down, like taking the whole sitting areas because I guess they must have been there all night," she said. "Wallets each over the place. People scattered each over the place, on the bottom, sitting, sleeping." Leclerc posted about the fire on Facebook, and her kinsman from Orangeville, Ontario, around 60 kilometers from Pearson, saw the post and offered them a lift. He drove them to Parry Sound, Ontario, around 163 kilometers south of Sudbury, and her son met them there and drove them the rest of the way. Leclerc said she still hasn't heard from Air Canada since her alternate flight was cancelled. "All I want is my plutocrat back from Toronto to Sudbury," she said. Smaller last nanosecond cancellations. Jean-Mathieu Chenier, the Greater Sudbury Airport's marketing director, said he hopes that by reducing the number of domestic breakouts ahead of time, Air Canada will not have the same number of last nanosecond cancellations that affect trippers. Like Leclerc, "It's delicate to rebuild passenger confidence in the trip assiduity if breakouts are being cancelled," he said. "Right now, Sudbury isn't going to be back into the full swing of effects until there is a dependable flight schedule and that business person can count on making the connection and going beyond just Toronto." For illustration, Terry Boss, the chairman and CEO of the Sault Ste. Marie Airport Development Corporation, said he expects last nanosecond cancellations from Air Canada to be greatly reduced now that there are smaller breakouts overall. He said the cancelled diurnal breakouts haven't affected the Sault Ste. Marie Airport will continue to have 3 diurnal breakouts from Toronto throughout the summer. The Timmins Victorme Power Airport, however, will be down to 2 diurnal Air Canada breakouts from Toronto, from the usual 3. "The late flight has now been suspended, and I was told that will presumably be into the morning of September," said Dave Payment, the field's director. "Just so Air Canada is not having bookings of breakouts of people and also just cheating them in riotous amounts the date their flight is cancelled." Payment said a carrier like Air Canada is more likely to cancel domestic breakouts with 70 passengers to an Indigenous field than larger transnational breakouts. Brian Avery, the field director at the North Bay Jack Garland Airport Corporation, said North Bay is down to 1 diurnal Air Canada flight from Toronto, for the summer. Avery said in a dispatch to CBC News that cancelled breakouts are delicate for the assiduity, at a time when further people are traveling due to smaller COVID-19 restrictions. "Unfortunately, the issues have negatively impacted some people's perception of the trip overall, continuing to impact the recovery of the whole aeronautics assiduity and associated diligence similar to tourism," Avery wrote. Home World China resumes transnational breakouts after 2-time COVID ban. China resumes transnational breakouts after 2-time COVID ban. China is further streamlining procedures for those arriving into the country after reducing the counter-blockade time to 7 days in designated hospices followed by 3-day isolation at home from the former 2-day isolation for inbound trippers, sanctioned media then reported on Tuesday. WordPress Trust of India updated July 5, 2022, 5:56 p.m. IST. China resumes transnational breakouts after 2-time COVID ban. China has started permitting transnational breakouts after a 2-time ban. Beijing, China has started permitting transnational breakouts after a 2-time ban due to the COVID-19 epidemic, but there's no word yet on the resumption of air services to India. Indeed, after Beijing lifted a visa ban for Indian professionals and their families last month. China is further streamlining procedures for those arriving into the country after reducing the counter-blockade time to 7 days in designated hospices followed by 3-day isolation at home from the former 2-day isolation for inbound trippers, sanctioned media then reported on Tuesday. Announcement. The policy has urged a huge increase in breakouts connecting China with other countries, especially the U.S., and the number of people traveling out of the country, the state-run Global Times reported, touting it as a sign of China further opening its borders to the world. China has made one of its most substantial adaptations since the COVID-19 epidemic, as its delegacies and consulates in 125 countries blazon programs to streamline procedures for people entering the Chinese landmass, it said, adding that 025 inbound passenger breakouts were set to renew from beforehand this week. There have been no regular routes between China and India since November 2020 and no breakouts have been notified yet between the two countries, it said. Beijing last month lifted a two-time visa ban for Indian professionals and their families working in colorful Chinese metropolises who are stuck back home over 2 times, but their trip to China remained a challenge as there are no breakouts between the two countries. China is also recycling the list of hundreds of Indian scholars wanting to return to the country to rejoin their sodalities. Over 000 Indian scholars, substantially studying drugs, are reportedly stuck back home due to COVID visa restrictions. India submitted a list of several hundred scholars after China sought the names of those wanting to return incontinently to pursue their studies. Announcement. Also, read. China's new COVID outbreaks put millions under lockdown again. China's new COVID outbreaks put millions under lockdown again. India logs 159 new COVID-19 cases, 28 COVID deaths in 24 hours. Center. India logs 159 new COVID-19 cases, 28 COVID deaths in 24 hours. Center. ASML shares fall after report suggests the U.S. wishes to circumscribe deals to China. ASML shares fall after report suggests the U.S. wishes to circumscribe deals to China. Stranded scholars from Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Russia, and several other countries have started arriving on chartered breakouts in the last many weeks. Beijing is reportedly reviewing the Indian pupil lists. China has permitted limited flight services to several countries in the neighborhood, including Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Nepal. Meanwhile, those Indian professionals and their families who began getting Chinese visas in India to return complain that they cannot travel to China as there are no breakouts. They say that trip through third countries is monstrously precious and makes them unaffordable.